Sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Modjeska School for Human Rights. Of course, tonight is our final actual class of the semester. Of course, this Friday we have our graduation festivities that will be taking place virtually. But tonight we're going to really finish up this semester, both by talking about what we've done so far and then looking ahead to what each of you will be doing individually or perhaps as part of teams once you graduate from the Modjeska School. So before I turn things over to Brett, I just want to give a couple of quick remarks about what this school is all about, what hopefully we have achieved here together this semester, and then what we can expect moving forward. Now, when the class began back in March, of course, by that point, the COVID-19 pandemic had hit America's shores pretty hard. But at the time, we had no clue that we'd be taking the class online for the entire semester. Back at that time, as a matter of fact, some of you actually met with us in person. And that was actually, now that I think about it, I've only been out in public a handful of times since then. That was the last time I was in a classroom setting, period, at least in person. But it has certainly, while it's been a challenging semester in terms of logistics, I think it has also been a fruitful one because so much of what has happened since mid-March has reminded all of us of the importance of being active citizens and potential activists in the process. Now, I want to read you guys a quick quote from one of my favorite speeches ever given. It's a speech actually from February 23rd, 1968, given by Martin Luther King Jr., in honor of what would have been the 100th birthday of W.E.B. Du Bois. And during this speech, Dr. King talks a great deal about Du Bois as both a scholar and an activist. And I want to just read you two parts of this speech. Let's see. First off, this is King talking about Du Bois in terms of how Du Bois worked as a scholar and as an activist. And I quote this part of the speech because I think at the end of this class, I see all of you as being both activists and scholars. Scholars in the sense that you've learned so much about the history of South Carolina, and activists because you're being given the tools with which to go out and fight for a better South Carolina. And this is what King said about Du Bois. Quotes, above all, he did not content himself with hurling invectives for emotional release, and then to retire into smug, passive satisfaction. History had taught him it is not enough for people to be angry. The supreme task is to organize and unite people so that their anger becomes a transforming force. It was never possible to know where the scholar Du Bois ended and the organizer Du Bois began. The two qualities in him were a single unified force. And so again, I hope that that part of his speech kind of really gets you all thinking about what you've learned so far and how you can utilize what you've learned. And I'll read a second part of the speech, and I'll leave a link to the entire speech in the comments because it's a really good one to read. Now, of course, in the recent weeks, we've had a lot of discussions about monuments, about American history itself and what that history looks like. And of course, the entire class has been about South Carolina history in particular. But I want to leave you with this quote too. This is from the same speech from Dr. King about W.E.B. Du Bois. Quote, in closing, it would be well to remind white America of its debt to Dr. Du Bois. When they corrupted Negro history, they distorted American history because Negroes are too big a part of the building of this nation to be written out of it without destroying scientific history. White America, drenched with lies about Negroes, has lived too long in a fog of ignorance. Dr. Du Bois gave them a gift of truth for which they should internally be indebted to him. Negroes have heavy tasks today. We were partially liberated and then re-enslaved. We have to fight again on old battlefields, but our confidence is greater, our vision is clearer, and our ultimate victory surer because of the contributions a militant, passionate Black giant left behind him. Now, again, that was Martin Luther King Jr. talking about W.E.B. Du Bois, but what I'm really hoping you guys will do is to take those words and take what you've learned in this class and to think about how much scholarship and activism often coincide with one another and how they feed into one another. Everything that we've done in this class this semester, with the last few weeks in particular, has become increasingly urgent. And I am not commanding you, but I am certainly asking you humbly, if at the end of this class you cannot conceptualize of yourself as an activist, at the very least, please think of yourselves as engaged and active citizens. Because Lord knows we don't have enough of those right now either. But as the last few weeks and the last month and a half or so have proven, being engaged with what's going on around you, knowing and acknowledging what it means to be a citizen, not only of this country, but of the world, it means at the very least caring about your fellow citizens. Because if you care about your fellow citizens, that's the best way you can care for yourself as well. Brett?
Love it. Love it.
Thank you. See why he's Dr. Green, and I'm not. But what I wanted to bring up is that the effective citizenship that Robert's talking about is something that we anticipate that you will spread like a virus, and that this idea of being an organizer it's a daunting task, and it's in a large part a thankless task. The ground here is not very fertile. I've met people in third world countries that had much more awareness of South Carolina politics and the American politics than I do my neighbors. And so this is tough, a tough row to hoe. But what we have to do is to be able to give people some sense that there is a reason to care. I don't think that people are apathetic. I think they think caring doesn't do any good. And so we've got to at least enjoy what we're doing to show that we've got some joy de vivre out of life and doing something for the right reasons. Because the ethics and morality in this country are alien at this point, really. And that nobody wants to son or daughter to grow up to be president at this point. And that we have to prove something to ourselves. And this one of the, I love to say it over and over again because I embrace it, is when Modjeska was asked, how do you keep doing this decade after decade? And she thought, and she said, well, I guess I'm just selfish because it makes me feel good. And so that's what I've been running on. I'm doing something here on the planet that I think is going to make me feel like I'm worthwhile here. And so that's like a very minimal takeaway Dr. Green talked about, being effective citizens that are doing things for the right reason. And one of the primary things that you can do is to take what you've learned and share it with your friends, your family, your church, your club, your school, your civic organization. And we have a tool that we've crafted that's kind of like a sampler of what we're trying to educate people about. And it's called Democracy 101. And there's a great deal of illusions and misconceptions about democracy in this country. And people are getting a greater awareness about how illusory it is. And so the Democracy 101 takes some of our programmatic programs that we wanted to give people, you or anyone else that gets involved with us, can work with these programs that we started. And the example that we want to use is the racial profiling project. And I don't know if any of our cadre or officers here want to speak to that. Daniel, did we find Mr. Fox?
Mr. Fox hasn't manifested as of yet.
Okay.
Mr. Crimminger?
Sure. I'll speak until Omari comes on board, until he manifests. But yeah, the racial profiling project is a good example of how network projects that we have available that you all can join in and help us reignite, if you will, some of them. Some of them are fully in motion, and we can have you jump on board pretty much immediately. Others need some reworking and retooling, but the racial profiling project follows the methodology of the Modjeska School itself. It found a problem, it analyzed the problem and proposed a solution, and then started organizing around it. And so when the network was founded in '96, we determined that racism, systemic racism, structural racism is the most serious problem in South Carolina. It affects everything, if not blatantly on the surface, certainly it permeates everything underneath. And so we commissioned a study on racial profiling, did interviews, research, and held town halls in Columbia, Charleston, and Greenville in the late 90s, and then wrote legislation. By 2000, we introduced the legislation, and the objective was to find something measurable, a measurable quantity to track racial injustice in law enforcement. And so that was the bill. The original bill was all cops report all stops, all police, all law enforcement in the entire state of South Carolina. At the time, there were close to 300. Now there are a little more than 310 or 315 law enforcement agencies in the state would report all demographics on every stop they make. It passed, the bill passed. It did get watered down, so all we have is all cops report all warning tickets, and that was because five white senators in a conference committee rewrote the bill, took out one word, and made it say that, made the legislation state that all cops would report all warning tickets. But even so, that data is publicly accessible. If you go to the Department of Public Safety's website, you can look up the public contact report for whatever law enforcement agency is over your area, wherever you're at. You should have two. You'll have your county level, your sheriff's department, and you'll have your local cop shop. You can look that up, find the data, run it against census data, and we can help you do that. And then call a meeting with your local police chief or your local sheriff and ask them, or thank them if they're reporting this data, because not all agencies are reporting the data. And if they're not reporting it, ask them why not. And the objective is to build, well, the long-term objective, of course, is to build a movement and build power, build relationships with other individuals, progressive individuals and other organizations, because that's the objective, democracy and power for everyday people in South Carolina. But for this particular racial profiling, this phase one we're calling of the Racial Justice Project, the objective is to build law enforcement support for a reworked bill that we're working on to have all cops again report all stops and all demographics and all, even more data. There's more data than there was before because of the insurance companies. Brett, do you want to speak to that about how the insurance companies now, because of their own great drive for profit, now we have all the data out there. The cops will have all the data. All they have to do is press a button if we can get the legislation passed, and all that data will be available to us, right?
Yeah, when we've been working on this literally since we started the network, as because we've seen and we continue to see the impact of racism, not just on people of color, but on everybody, because of that old saying that when you've got your foot on somebody's back, they can't get up, but you can't go anywhere. And so it was the main reason South Carolina is proudly poor and stupid, is that we've decided to keep the segment of the population down and the rest of us suffer from it. And that the work that we did, when we were asking for this to be done at a time when it would have taken cops literally off the road, take time, and et cetera, et cetera. And that was the police pushback. And that the police have generally, the head cops have always been receptive to understanding that the more positive relationships they have with the community, the safer it makes their jobs. And that probably 5 or 6 years ago, Joe Neal and I met with the head of SLED, who was supportive, and he understood what we were trying to do. And he said, be patient, because we're moving in that direction where what you want, you can get. And so we now are at a point where, because it's like a safety, Highway Safety Administration working with the insurance companies to do accident rates to help set insurance rates. They're tracking all accidents, and a lot of the patrol cars, all the patrol cars now, the high patrol cars and all of the major towns have computers in them that allow them to swipe your driver's license, record all the data that's on it, and it's fed into the big computer. And so much of what we wanted is already there. It doesn't cost anything to do. It's just a matter of sorting it in a different direction. And so it's reflective of what we're trying to learn to prepare ourselves to take advantage of opportunities that present themselves. And we did this. We set up a methodology for people that are trying to mitigate the violence of police and the racial insensitivity. And we haven't been able to communicate with them enough to be able to use this tool in their own town to be able to do what it is that people have been in the streets complaining about recently. And so that's frustrating for us, but that's the nature of the game. And so that's a summation of the racial profiling project. Is the questions about how one could take that and plug into it, or wherever you're from in South Carolina, you can actually look up that town and find the disparities in who they stop. And it's not just warning tickets, it's called public contact. And so they're supposed to write, they being the cops, are supposed to write up every time they stop somebody and don't arrest them. The actual language in the legislation is non-custodial stops, meaning that if you're stopped by a police officer and he doesn't take you in, he's supposed to write it up. And so we can find areas where a police officer, say Mount Pleasant is a really good example. It's a bastion of white conservatism. And if you're black in Mount Pleasant, you're 6 times as likely to be stopped as a white person. That's enough for that a local entity in Mount Pleasant to organize around. So the things that we're trying to do is to empower citizens around the state to use the tools that we're putting together and giving them for free to be able to organize some local capacity. If not questions on that, we'll move on to another project.
I'm just curious how this is working in the field. I know Omari's probably, and Kyle and Daniel have the most experience with the project, like trying to explain it to people that aren't network members. And I'm just wondering, I know that we can do a better job of packaging this thing and making it like give people a packet like we're doing with the Fair Maps work. Like, here's a petition and here's what you need to do and here's your deadline, and have actual pieces, toolkits that we can put together. And I'm just wondering, I'd like to know from either of those people that have been out there working on this, if this is something that somebody in this class could help move it a little step further by helping it be more clear and more useful in terms of just organizers. Omar, you have something to add to that? Or do you understand my question?
Yeah, I do. I would say right now, well, when I first came across the project, I'm going to quote Dr. Green a little bit, it's not the most sexy thing. 5 or 6 years ago, even coming after Ferguson. But I think what's happening with police and community engagement now is there's a lot more focus on policy work that could actually affect change. And I think now the iron would be hot to kind of reintroduce this project as a contained project or as an add-on to a larger movement. But pretty much all of the projects, I think it's just a matter of folks knowing their terrain and how to deliver the information. Some people need it presented a little more academically, and they might need some more statistics. And some people just need it in a conversational, very plain Jane way, like, oh, police contact, document it, and get the stat, So it just kind of depends on the audience. But I think it's relatively clear and simple. I think just the timing of it right now, it's an unfortunate perfect storm with all this national conversation around policing.
I'm just wondering if maybe we could create a webinar, or just at least start there with different levels of engagement, just like, here's your bare bones, this is what we've done. And then a little deeper dive about how you can actually take this in community with the actual physical steps that you would take to approach your police department or your community to get them involved.
That sounds like a really good idea and a perspective for somebody to grab a hold of.
one of the liabilities in a lot of our work is the absence of infrastructure anywhere. There aren't very many organizations out there that are geared up to do things other than protest. And the couple groups that I know that have used this, used it in a way that, in part, that it's intended to do, which is to kind of empower them to speak to authority. I mean, how many of you have gone to talk to your local cops? It's like, it's not something you normally do. And that I remember a group in Spartanburg that was a local community organization. I was involved with the Spartanburg branch of the NAACP also. Looked at the data, and it was disproportionate, more black people being stopped. And they went and met with the cops. And they made an appointment. They went in. The head cop was really nice to them, appreciated them coming in. And he explained to them that most of those stops, he had the data too, were on some big road that goes through their area from Spartanburg to Greenville. And that, so there was a dialogue established. And the officer that was in charge, I can't remember who they spoke with, concurred with them that greater transparency was helpful. But what that did was it opened a door for them to have some relationships with the people they're paying to help guard their community. And that the underlying problem with our police is that we've created a circumstance where we have warriors guarding our, instead of peace officers, and that we need guardians as opposed to warriors. And you begin that by, going and talking to them. And so this is a door opener. Another, for instance, is at the University of South Carolina. If you are Black, especially if you're young and Black, please do not drive through the University of South Carolina. Your chance of being stopped are like 1,200 times as great. And the things like that anybody anywhere in South Carolina has at least 2 police agencies watching after them. And so it's a tool to learn how to work with people that have authority over you and to diminish that combative relationship that only comes about driven by fear. So that's something that if somebody's really interested in, would come back and we'll do a deeper dive for them. Let's see, Daniel, who did we decide was best to speak about our MVP project now? Is that Omari?
Correct.
Omari?
Hi, my name is Amari Fox. I'm a Leo. I grew up in the Bronx, New York, and I've been living in South Carolina for 30 years. Yeah, so in a nutshell, we're all MVPs. You're an MVP, I'm an MVP. We're all part of the Missing Voter Project. So I just came back from Saluda Saturday and just did a kind of a teaser presentation. I'm going to take a deeper dive in 2 weeks when I go back. But for the most part, kind of similar sentiment to what I was saying earlier about the racial justice piece. I think the sentiment of it is pretty clear. To be able to go into a database or even get the data from us, directly and isolate like the engaged voters, and then folks follow up with the folks who already went to the polls in that 18 to 24 year age bracket. The similarity, I guess, between all of the projects is that folks would kind of know, the verbiage and the terrain of who to approach and how to deliver the information. The maps and the graphics and the stats are pretty clear. And for the most part, folks could just kind of open up a dialogue around how they feel about democracy locally. And then by the end of the presentation, you not only know, pretty much the meat and potatoes of gerrymandering and voter engagement. You get to see the potential impact of all voters, but particularly Black voters who are registered and inactive. And you also get to isolate those who have participated in, the last couple of elections since they've been 18. And I think that's where your movement starts. It's just kind of dialoguing with the natural allies that you already have. And then those folks will know other folks who will know other folks. And I think slowly but surely after that, you certainly have a movement on your hands. That's not about, okay, so it's 30 days before election. everybody's registered, not just mobilizing folks to the polls, but as part of a larger movement of sustained engagement, you know, past and between, you know, midterm and presidential year elections.
Amari, speak to what's different about the Missing Voter Project than a candidate's campaign or a party's campaign.
Well, off top, as a C3 project, it's already nonpartisan, so we're not telling folks who to vote for. We're just kind of encouraging and supporting folks to engage. The people who are engaged already, but don't necessarily have like that movement to be a part of. And I think what we bring to the table is the movement piece, as opposed to candidate endorsement and latching on to a party. And I think a party, pretty much, you go through the ritual every 2 years. You wear your campaign paraphernalia, you go to the polls, they win or they don't win, and then everybody pretty much just goes back to normal, and there's no systemic change whether they win or not. And I think what we're advocating for is the sustained engagement, just beyond just, you know, actually registering, voting, and mobilizing. So to be able to take that deeper dive and then do the homework on attaching a people's movement, you know, based on our value system, and then attaching it to policy and potential candidates, you know, who may come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. One of the things that we're doing with the Missing Voter Project is looking for the people that are voting, and that anybody that works on a campaign will tell you, don't bother with those people. And historically, the Democratic Party has spent a great deal more energy trying to convince 3 or 4%. That Vince Sheehy lost to Nikki Haley by less than 4%. He had 59,000 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Over 500,000 Black people didn't vote. Vince spent all his money and time trying to convince 4% of Republicans to vote for him. And he was like Republican light, you know, he couldn't say Obamacare, and he didn't support gay marriage. And Vince, people want to vote for a Republican, they can find one. And the idea that you go and fish in a pool of people that aren't voting seems to be alien. And so that's what we've been doing. And we do our electoral work in a fashion that is not party related or candidate related, but policy related. And so it's legitimate for a nonpartisan group to tell people what policies are affecting their lives. And we've educated groups in using our targeted databases to be able to find 5,800 people, young Black people without health insurance, and let them know which candidates are supporting expansion of Medicaid, changing the outcome of elections. And so that's that deal, and that's going on now. The Missing Voter Project is something that we've been doing since '04, and we're doing it differently this year. Omari spoke to how we're looking at young Black voters that voted and trying to gear them up and enthuse the 12% of young people, young Black people under it's now, we did the demographic on 18 to 24 after the 2018 election. So there's now some 26 years olds and another crop of 18-year-olds in there. 12% of the entire state of young Black people under 28 have voted once since 2018. And that was the first time many of them voted. It's just a terrible turnout because they don't think it does that much good. And so that's something that we're doing now that you can tune into and go to the Missing Voter Project at our website. And the other project that we have ongoing that we want to share with you before we hear some things that y'all have thought about doing is the fair maps, which is the concept of gerrymandering is really alien to people, but it's really critical to the fact that democracy is absolute hoax in South Carolina. And Daniel, you're running that project for us now. What's happening?
Sure. So, good evening. One of the questions that Dr. Green and Brett has continued to evoke for us is this inquiry, how do we make and sustain change, right? And so that's a question I often think about myself. So outside of what? A massive occupation, a general strike, an armed insurrection, you're going to have to participate in bourgeois democracy. And so I don't want to be redundant here, but 73% of South Carolinians have one person to vote for in their legislative races. 40% of African Americans have one white Republican to vote for Senate. That's not what democracy looks like. And so if you're interested in making change, irrespective of what your issue is, it could be environmental, it could be racial justice, etc. If you don't have a functioning democracy, you're not going to be able to put your reforms through. So this is one instance in which we call ourselves radicals, right? This is what is at the root of not being able to pass reforms and making and sustaining change. But we have a plan, and I'm going to summarize because I know you've heard this before. That state law empowers citizens to put a petition with 15% of their county voters before the county council, which shall be adopted or shall go to a vote. And so what we're doing is, with our petition, is to get 15% of each county, and we're starting with Richland County, which I'll get to in a moment, for the county council to adopt that the citizens of Richland County demand fair maps, for the voters to pick the politicians instead of the politicians picking the voters. And so we've selected Richland County because we have some allies here and we think we can push this through before November 3rd. Why is that important? Well, because as Brett will tell you, those of us who have ran the election protection hotline, we had a lot of people calling say, hey, there are no Democrats on my ballot. Hey, there are no Republicans on my ballot. And we had to articulate what? This is by design. This is due to racial and partisan gerrymandering. And so we're focusing right now only on network members. We have something called a VPB. It's a virtual phone bank. It's something you can do in your spare time. I can give you a very simple training. And we're asking our network member and allies, one, to sign the petition. I'll email it or I'll snail mail it to them. And two, become an activist themselves. On July 4th, in the spirit of 76, in the spirit of, and forgive me one moment here, Dr. Green, for being philosophical, in this negative category proposed by Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident: all men, all people are created equal. This is something Robert Frost said. It's a hard mystery of Jefferson with all his contradictions. It's a contradiction, it's a proposition of equality that every American generation will have to contend with. I'm asking you to contend with this contradiction with me in a very simple way of making calls to our allies, to network members, in order to realize democracy, in order to make and sustain change. So if you're interested, my email address is daniel@scpronet.com. I'll give you this training. You're going to be speaking with network members. They won't be hostile. So yeah, please join us. Until then, ride on, fight on, power to the people.
Thank you, Daniel. There should be many questions about that, but we'll take some now if you have any questions about how the heck we're going to try and change something that will require changing the Constitution of the state of South Carolina that was drawn by Ben Tillman. We got a plan. Nobody else does. Questions?
Question. The numbers again. What's the percentage that has to be presented to counties?
That's 15%. I'm sorry, Marjorie, go ahead.
Go ahead. That's it.
That's 15% of voters in Richland County. That's 35,000 voters,
Okay.
and we're gonna shoot for 40. Just we want to push it over the edge.
Okay.
This is one of the beauties of a ballot initiative. That's what they call this, ballot initiative, is that it's by definition nonpartisan. Meaning we can actually use grant money, could we get it to do it, but that the fact that it's nonpartisan should sink into people's heads that affects everybody. And we've had to, in terms of selling this thing to people, is to get involved in it, like, well, what's in it for white people? And Kyle, do you remember how many white people only have a black person to vote for? It's a chunk of people, right?
That ought to get their attention.
We had trouble actually. So you were saying something, Marjorie?
No, I'm mumbling. Go ahead.
We had trouble actually coming up with a number because the districts overlap, Brett, but it was above 12%. It was a good couple hundred thousand white folks who only had a black Democratic candidate to vote for. Yes.
So what's happened, at least in my paying attention, which pretty much started in 1965 when they passed the Voting Rights Act. And the Voting Rights Act required any state that had a racist history to have everything approved by the Justice Department before they changed anything in voting. And so that included drawing the lines. And so in the 90s, it started getting really bad when the Republicans started becoming the majority party, and they got to draw the lines. And they were drawing lines that were bad. And so Justice Department would say, that doesn't work. And so they'd say, well, let's give the black people some districts. And so they gave up what amounts to, I think it's about 44 districts now that the Democrats can win, predicated on race. Predicated on race. We have racial gerrymandering approved by the federal government for the last 50 years that they call partisan gerrymandering because they don't regulate that. I mean, it's up to us to change by elections to change who draws the lines. So it's a conundrum that we've been placed in that we have now racially gerrymandered districts. And for the last 3 cycles of House elections, the outcome is the same. There's 44 Democratic seats and the rest are Republican. The chances are extremely high in 2020, the same results will happen. There may be 1 or 2 this way and that way, but the changes happen, if they happen, in the primaries. And so you still have 44 Democrats and you may change the face. And so that is what we're stressing moving into the new decade of redistricting. With the census coming back in 2021, the legislature will be given the numbers on April 1 to draw new maps and apportion people evenly. There's about 35,000 in a House district, 125,000 in a Senate district. As the population grows, those numbers change and they push people around. And it's like, I don't want that person or that neighborhood in my district, and they push that around. And so that the people that will get to draw the lines for the next decade are the same people that drew the lines for the last decade, that are winning because they drew the lines. And so we're locked into this like loop that we have to figure out a way to break, and we've got a plan. And so that's it, and you're welcome to hop on board. It's exciting. Is it sexy enough, Robert?
I would say it is effective. I don't know if we should say sexy or not, but not everything in life is about sexiness. Sometimes just got to get the job done.
Thank you, sir. I'm not sure that was your
I won't take that analogy any further than that. Let's just put it that way.
Brett, I don't know if you can see the comments, but Anita asked an important question. If you'd like to respond to that.
Anita, go for it. Unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Didn't want to interrupt the flow. Brett, you'd mentioned that grants could be used for Fair Map since it was a ballot initiative. Are there any specific things that we need funds for, like the virtual phone bank? I mean, obviously the network overall, but as it relates to Fair Maps?
Yeah, staff people. I mean, if we had 46 staff people, that would be super in each county. If we had 7, 1 for each congressional district, that'd be great. If we had just 1 or 2 administrative people to help in Columbia, that would be superb. When we started this plan, we literally started this plan pretty much in 2016 and perfected it in 2018. We introduced legislation to put this on the ballot in 2018. Gilda Cobb-Hunter in the House and Mike Fanning in the Senate, our members, were the sponsors. Very well-defined plan, actually legislative plan that outlines how to do it, and then also introduced a constitutional amendment that would allow the people to vote on it. And y'all need to know that South Carolina is one of the states that the people can't put something on the ballot to change the Constitution. There's 27 other states, well, 26 other states. We're one of 27 states that can't do that. The only states that have taken the power to draw the lines away from the people that benefit from drawing the lines have the power for the citizens in California, Colorado, Arizona, Michigan. or is it Wisconsin? I keep confusing those states where it freezes. And so there's 4 states that have actually done this, but they were able to take up the petitions statewide and put it directly on a general election ballot. The only entity that can put a question to change the Constitution on the ballot is the legislature themselves. And so our plan with the petitions through the counties, I can't use the term blackmail or hostage taking, but it's a very strong plan to be able to show the legislators in our district, we can take up the petitions in their district of the people that vote for them, and we will get more people in their district, more voters in their district that vote for them to let them vote on it than they win by. At some point, they will lose if they don't let us vote on it. It may take a while, but it's the plan. And so, Anita, the idea of having people to help is profound, and I'll be calling you quite shortly. So those are the main projects that we have. There's 3 of them: the Missing Voter Project, Fair Maps, and our racial profiling thing that are programmatic and woven into what we started years ago. And deep and wide, a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of capability. And then we've got some other things that are going on. We started a monument project that our interpretation of the monuments is different than what they say. And it's something that could be done on a more regular basis than we've been able to do it. Some students in the past couple classes have taken it on, but that's something that could use some help. And Becky or somebody else help me remember anything else before we open it up to the floor here.
Let me just say that I think that the monument project is a really good one, and it's something that obviously speaks to the work that we've been doing here. And I know that Robert Greene had been advising the 2 women that had been leading up that effort that were graduates from 2 years ago, I believe. And they did a couple really well attended monument tours on the State House grounds. And then the virus stuff happened and things just kind of fell apart. But I think that there's opportunities there to broaden out beyond the State House grounds, which has been the focus, and the Confederate monuments and the more troubling other monuments on the State House grounds. But there are as we're discussing now, there are public buildings and other markers and all kinds of things in public spaces that deserve a second look. And if we can't remove them, that they certainly deserve some reinterpretation or some vetting by people with a broader agenda than the folks who got to write the stuff in the first place, and choose who got to be anointed. So I think there's a lot of possibility there. We had talked about creating an app that people could go do some of these tours on their own, try to figure out a half-hour tour of whatever, either topically or geographically, that you could send people out with their own thing that you can, this would be what you would create, obviously. Either it could be a recording or just something that you would pull up on your phone that you could map out on a grid. I just think it's got a lot of possibilities, and it's going to take people with those skills to pull that off. And we don't have those right now. So I would encourage anybody that's interested in taking that a step further to get in touch with the women we can provide information about who's been doing it before. I don't want to step on their toes because they've been doing, good work, but they can certainly use some help, and there's enough work to go around in that arena. And they also, while I've got the floor, one of these women had started a podcast. And I don't know how many sessions they did, but I think it's a really rich opportunity. I think Vicki will keep doing her podcast. It's the New Legacy Project podcast. It's just been on hiatus. But I think that the Modjeska School or the network or some other iteration of progressive work that's going on in our circles could really benefit from having a podcast or a YouTube you know, West had talked about trying to do like a 15-minute something, little news clips or something, commentary. And I really wish that y'all would consider that. And I really encourage you, Wes, to think really hard about what you could do in that arena, because again, that's got a lot of possibilities, and we have the bones and the structure and a lot of content to help you out with. So anyway, those are just a couple things that I think, I hope that we can get some support from folks in here. And I think one thing I would just also mention is that this is an opportunity for not just projects, but either skills that you have to contribute to projects. You know, what do you have? Like Chris Gardner is, God bless him, has IT skills and has been really helpful for the past several years in helping us set up events and make sure that the sound and lights and all that kind of stuff is working. And then there are other people that, you know, that are helping on the ground with other projects, just showing up when we have events to help break things down. And the websites, all the projects have their own websites or parts of the website. So we need help with content there, and if you have web skills and want to contribute, we'd love to have you. If you want to learn web skills or blogs, you know, how to WordPress or any of that kind of stuff, we'd love to apprentice with you. And the last thing I'll mention is that we've got a grow building. Maybe Gareth can speak to this, but we can always use volunteers to help with physical building work and or fundraising. So either if you've got skills or want to learn how to do any of that stuff, this is your chance.
Thank you, Becky. Let me say one more thing about the monument project. Is something I've really been wanting to do that hadn't been done, that's ready to do. We can't physically change the statues because of the Heritage Act, which is maybe falling soon, but we can stand there with our own marker, and we have the ability to make something that looks just like a historical marker about Ben Tillman that was written by Vernon Burton and Robert. Remind me who the younger gentleman that's name starts with a K, that's Vernon's buddy.
Oh, are you talking about Stephen Kantrowitz?
There you go. The two main Tillman experts in America have written something that I gave them. I went to the Archives and History site where you find out how many words you can put on one of those markers. They did a marker. We've got the words that nobody can dispute. And we'll make that thing look just like a marker, and you go stand there with it, and then you get somebody else to stand there with it. And I think that's a great idea. So anyway, that's the type of brainstorming we need to do. So let's open it up for, Garrett, did you have some follow-up on the working on the grow? Not putting her on the spot.
Brett,
yes,
Marjorie, I just want to add to the marker monument project the fact that it really kind of comes from a Modjeska idea. And if you would please repeat that, I can't do her actual words.
This is something, y'all, if you haven't heard me say this, you haven't been listening. And it was one of the more profound things in my life as a young radical. A young radical who was arrested in 1969 for burning a Confederate flag at the University of South Carolina at the end of a white, there's a White Awareness Week on the anniversary of the Orangeburg Massacre. And we were going to call it Black Awareness Week, but really decided it was the white people that were unaware. And I argued with Modjeska for a good 20 years. Take that damn thing down. And she would say, leave the damn rag up there. I'd rather see the Klan in sheets than in suits. As long as that rag flies from the top of that building, you know what's in the hearts of the people inside.
Okay.
So we need to make them squeal to take it down. We need to make them confront the racial, the white supremacy woven into the fabric of the government that we're running. And so it's kind of like being able to make them acknowledge the pain. And so that's the dynamic I think that historians want to not remove the history until you learn from it. All these people up on these statues, when did they learn about Ben Tillman? I mean, there are people, certainly I know that I'm old enough to know people that actually, I guess not of, when did Ben die? Ben was in Congress in the early teens, so Modjeska was alive when Ben was in the Congress. And so this is like taking a long time to deal with. And you take this down, what's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years when people don't understand how institutionalized racism is? Shouldn't we deal with the institutionalization before we take down the evidence of it? So there's that dynamic that we've been fighting with as historians. But at the very least, we can go and reinterpret things and continue to educate people about it. So thank you, Marjorie. And I got to tell that story in a session of the legislature where they unveiled a portrait of Modjeska, which hangs in the State House now, when I was the only white person invited to speak. And I got there, and the governor, David Beasley, was there, and the Speaker of the House, a white Republican, acting like Modjeska was their long lost friend. And I was able to quote Modjeska about the damn rag being up there when Beasley was keeping it up there. And he changed his mind in 2 weeks. And we've always thought that it might have been the spirit of Modjeska that rousted him out to change his mind. That's a great story, Marjorie. Thank you for allowing me to share it again. Robert, take over and solicit input and discussions and critiques about what we can do in the future.
So I really want to open the floor, of course, to questions and comments about either the projects that have been presented this evening, or if you have your own ideas for projects. One of the things that the Progressive Network always wants to do is to really develop and cultivate new project ideas from folks who are in the Modjeska School. Because again, there may be projects or ideas that you may have that you want to kind of put out there and begin to construct potential projects for us to work on, both short term and long term. And tonight you can also, if you want, you can seek out other members of the graduating class of this Modjeska School to form potential teams, work on those projects and so forth. But above all, what we want to do tonight is to hear from you in terms of what projects that you've heard about tonight strike your fancy, or on the flip side, what project ideas you may have that you want to throw out there as well, things that you're thinking about doing in the short and long run.
Well, since this idea came up before, let me speak to a little bit about what we talked about last time. And I wrote down a few notes, and having thought about it over the weekend, I was thinking of, and this might be a lofty goal, but history is built on lofty goals, that we could be the democracy now of this region. Progressive TV SC or whatever, it would come up with a name, but nonetheless, it would be some sort of a podcast or a combination of podcast and blog that basically is a maybe 15 minutes to a half an hour presentation as to what's going on a daily basis in the state. You'd have an interview, 5-minute interview of some person that's moving about and people should know about, and also the projects that the Progressive Network is working on. People would know about, or would want to know, or should want to know about those projects as well. Perhaps they just need a little jog, or just need a little nudge to to realize what's going on with gerrymandering or what have you. And since we also talked about last time, excuse me, the Point newspaper that was once part of this organization, if I got it right. The idea that I was talking about as far as going onto the web or with a podcast or a blog is that it would be basically a digitization or virtual or electronification of the Point. I don't know how many, since I wasn't here and I've never read it, then I really can't speak to what content or what you would want to model to go on to the web, but that's a little food for thought. We could also do a little bit of investigative reporting, I guess, and what Omari was talking about earlier in terms of the interactions with the police, that sort of thing could be highlighted on this blog or podcast. Excuse me, I'm not up on all the terms, but anyway, it would be kind of a news program, if you will, or a current affairs program or public service to let people know what's going on around them, who their allies are and who their other people are that are working against them. And we could also have interviews or discussions with groups that we see as either allies or, or adversaries. And I'm going to rely somewhat upon my experience in Michigan, where I was active with AARP. Why couldn't we bring on an AARP person to talk about what they're doing, so that we more or less magnify our alliances with other groups and let people know about them. And one thing that was brought up earlier too was I think it was either Brett or one of Dr. Green talking about the quantification of these issues with statistics, and to stretch that quantification into how are these non-favorable issues like police profiling affecting the state monetarily. It's draining money from them if they get involved in a lawsuit, obviously. But, basically magnifying these issues on a convenient output like the web, podcast, and certainly with the younger generation, they key right in on this with Instagram or whatever else is the going thing right now. But nonetheless, it would be a virtualization or digitization of what the point was about, along with some new ideas, that might come from any one of us. So one of the things that I noticed was that upon moving here is that the library has a studio. In the main library, they have a studio set up where if you didn't know how to set up a camera or how to set up lights, I guess you could learn down there, and we can use that as a resource. So that's kind of like, the area that I'm interested in. And, it could grow from there, basically. So there it is.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Wes. You're the one we've been waiting for. And one of the whole concepts of getting our building, our school building, the Modjeska school building that we're calling the Grow building, right next to Modjeska's house, up and running, even in pandemic land, is for our broadcast studio. We've got all the tools. We just need somebody like you that's not all caught up in everything else we're doing to be the producer. Our virtual own Amy Goodwin. Thank you.
One of the advantages of being retired is that you have more things to do than you used to do when you were working. So yeah, I'm retired, and maybe I can devote some time to that.
And somebody else is paying you. That even works better.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Robert, I'm sorry. Take it back.
No, I mean, that's wonderful. And I think I'll add to what Wes is talking about here. And also what Becky mentioned with the New Legacy podcast and such, is that while there's been a rapid expansion number of podcasts about politics and progressive politics in particular over the last 5 or 6 years, there is a noticeable lack of podcasts about the South specifically. And so I think if the Progressive Network were to undertake this particular project or something like it, it would actually fill a niche that I think a lot of people are dying to hear. And certainly what I have found, I think I told the story before this semester, is that even a lot of people who are active in progressive politics or grassroots organizing across the country, when they're asked about South Carolina or they learn about the state of South Carolina, they're shocked by what they learn. Like, they are not aware of the rich history of progressive activism here in the state. They aren't really aware of people like Modjeska Simkins, or they might know of Kima Clark somewhat. They might have heard of other folks from the state, but not very much. And so I think this kind of project, if it's well thought out, well planned, and executed properly, could not only be a boon for the Progressive Network, but could really get more folks both inside and outside of South Carolina aware of so many issues here and how those issues affect politics nationally and internationally.
Concur.
Are there any other, because I think that's a great project. We should explore that some more if possible. Are there other project ideas that folks have tonight? Things that they're thinking about or kind of brainstorming right now?
I'll speak to my experiences recently. I was appointed to the Board of Voter Registration and Elections for Pickens County back in April. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what happened there, but the entire department and board walked out one day. There was some personal issues that interfered with them doing their job. So we're pretty much starting from scratch, which I found to be a great opportunity for change. Unfortunately, 5 of us board members are, 5 of the 7 were appointed. We're still waiting on a 6th. And we are all Caucasian, which is not representative of the district at all. And so that's been a sore point, but we were fortunate enough to appoint a young African-American man to lead the department at the executive director level, which was a great start. But I've been focusing on the website and developing the information that's available to the public, because I think anybody who has either worked a poll or even if you just go vote, regularly, there's so many questions that are left unanswered before you ever get to the poll. How do I get an absentee ballot? How do I access a sample ballot about what I'm going to be looking at when I walk in? And so my personal goal has been to get as much information out to the public as possible, as quick as we can. And so I've been trying to do that through the website, and then, promoting that on social media and trying to push that with my fellow board members. So that's something I've really, discussions that we've had here have helped me with what kind of information I need to make sure I'm accessing, and I'm putting data out there that aligns with what the people of Pickens County are looking for, and how to get to some state resources.
Lillian, you've rung my bell.
Good.
This is it. This is where the rubber meets the road, where we practice fake democracy.
Yeah.
And that you were appointed by the legislative delegation.
Correct.
I'm now looking at the Pickens County slide that we'll give you for your Democracy 101 presentation. And I see you've got 2 senators and 5 representatives. And I see what they won by. And oh my goodness, there's only one, no, there's 2, that won with less than 97%. And Wes Cox won with 76 and Bill Sandifer won with 63. They were appointed, they're all Republicans.
Yes.
They appointed the board.
Yes.
And the board hires the director. So we have very different appearances in the way that elections are run in different states because of the Ben Tillman Constitution that was written, where the governor appointed 3 men of good character, which obviously were white, to be the ultimate arbiters of elections in Pickens County. The senator of Pickens County appointed them. And now it's the legislative delegation. And so without understanding who drew the rules, it's difficult to be able to proceed. So this is a longer conversation that I'm really excited about having, because I've been working with the State Election Commission since they were created in the 70s. And boy, howdy doody, you're in a good position to be able to take advantage of the things I've learned and you need to practice in Pickens County.
Yeah, I'll have to get some more information from you. I know one of the requirements for the board is that you must have 1 representative from each major party. So 1 Democrat, 1 Republican at minimum, and then the other members can be, from whatever mix. I was appointed for the Democratic representative position, and then all the other members were put in by what I have found just through casual conversation with them. Rex Rice appointed them all, or put them all up for consideration, and then the delegation approved them. So it's just really indicative of what's been happening along. And so hopefully slight changes, with the leadership will help, but we'll see. Trying.
This underscores our need when we lack power, we have to be really clever. And I will give you some clever ways to be able to make some headway out of the bad hand that the people have been dealt in Pickens County.
I'll take it.
Super.
All right. And And Brett, did you want to talk a bit more broadly about the election protection project?
Well, I know that there's some other people out here that have things that they're wanting to say, but real quickly, I'll just say that on the election issue, that certainly that Lillian just raised, the Progressive Network has been the state command center for the National Election Protection Hotline since it was created in '08. And we got the new machines, the new system of voting in '04, and we were on the ground in '04. So we were involved in the Help America Vote Act implementation that came after the hanging Chad in '02. So we really are more aware of the pluses and minuses of the election system in South Carolina than anybody else. And so we're running this election protection hotline, which is if you want to help with this, and you don't have in Columbia, you can be anywhere and monitor the incoming calls. The busiest day we had was 2008 when that guy from Kenya was running for president. And we had 1,100 calls on that day. And it came out to like 1 point something a minute. And most of the calls were confused voters, and some were confused poll workers, and a few were actually like really problems. But it allows us to analyze the systemic problems, systemic lack of information, and gives us a better handle on the way elections are practiced in South Carolina than anybody else has. So we ran this, we ran it in the presidential preference primary, we ran it in this runoff and the June 8th primary. And the main thing that struck us was people calling, freaking out because something was wrong. They would go to vote, and the people at the precinct said, you have to vote Republican. Or some precincts that said, you have to vote Democrat. And people said, that's not what democracy looks like. And we said, oh, that's right. And so we're in a position to be able to explain to people why it's not working. And so the election protection hotline, we will run again this November, and we could do it in a much grander fashion. We've got yard signs and t-shirts, and we can give you credentials to be a poll watcher. And so that's something that you need to make a note of if you want to do that. We'll have a training session as we get close to the election. And thank you, Robert.
Thank you. All right, so talking about projects, Julia, did you have a project you wanted to talk about with the group?
Sure, and just interrupt if my signal is staticky. Well, I would definitely like to be a poll watcher, Brett, here, so I'll look into that. As a middle school teacher, the first way that the Modjeska school is impacting my work is how it will be interwoven within the content that I'm sharing with students. So that's one, and that's not insignificant. And so the online study guides are really going to be priceless for me in that, and being able to go back to those resources. And I actually just used the online study guide a little bit on a curriculum project for a USC center run by Dr. Gloria Boutte. So I just share that to say that, it's already, impacted the content that I'm working with and sharing with students. So that's one. And then two, Every Black Girl, the organization founded and run by Vivian Anderson, which I'm one of the teacher volunteers for, has just launched a campaign to remove school resource officers from Richland County schools. And it's, if you go to the Every Black Girl Facebook page, you can see videos and see the petition and learn more. But participating in the groundwork of, actually making phone calls to the Richland County School Board, starting with Richland District 1, then 2, then Lexington and Richland 5. So the organizing that is happening around that, my participation in that is the second project, and it's not my project, it's Every Black Girl's project, but I'm committing my time to it in different ways because it's the organization and the cause is something that I believe in wholeheartedly. And then the third part related to removing school resource officers is taking all that funding that goes to law enforcement in schools and actually having it go to mental health counselors, more teachers, more qualified teachers, all of that. So the small way that I am addressing that within my own middle school that I work at is collaborating with a veteran teacher who has more longer standing relationships and more of them within our school, but who we agree and have a good relationship on approaching our principal and vice principal with a strong request to continue a trend that is already there, thankfully, but to really push for some, in short, restorative justice changes in the school, if that makes sense. And so, you know, I don't want to take up too much time, but it's basically being where I am, you know, doing what I do, but amping up and making some changes, you know, many of it inspired by this class and the call for us to, you know, be in action.
Sounds good.
That sounds fantastic. Those are all, again, I think what you're hearing this evening is that there are a wide variety of potential projects that folks can get underway or can team up on. And so, you know, again, the more creative, the better.
Yeah, and I made notes, Julia, that introducing you and Vivian to people that are working on the whole concept of that guardian warrior, guardian warriors, that, you know, that resulted in having police in our schools, helps give you some really substantive data to work with in your project. So I'll connect projects, and Daniel will work closely with us. Thank you.
Brad. Anita has not said anything, but she also is very active with that project.
Make her talk.
I just did.
You just did. And you know, when Marjorie calls you out, you gotta say something. So yeah, my space is women, philanthropy, and social justice. So everything that, and Julia was actually been so engaged, even more so than myself. But along those lines, the project that Daniel was talking about earlier with Fair Maps, I see as that and Democracy 101 as a space where, well, I'll be stepping up and not only seeing if we can get some resources. There's a group, and I'll put it in the chat, called Women Engaged, that's focused on philanthropy. And Dr. Green started off with a quote from Martin Luther King earlier, and it reminded me of one of the founding quotes for Women Engaged, which is, philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary. And so I see as a part of our growing toolkit an opportunity to infuse all this fabulous collateral, you know, the Democracy 101 as an orientation for everyone that is going to be involved in this social justice philanthropy, and then create that further awareness so that they can hopefully not only do better things with what they're with the money they're giving. And, you know, we're reading a book called Decolonizing Wealth. So all of this lines up, but also to get engaged with the various projects and learn more about the Progressive Network. And again, one of the organizations that we've supported in kind and are strong allies with is Women Engaged. So
Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. Fantastic. All right, so any other project ideas? Please go ahead.
May I chime in here? Just
Sure, go ahead, please.
I wanted to just share and elevate the work. You know, Julia mentioned it, but I'll also say, you know, Julia, myself, and Cecil, I don't want to talk for you, but we met a couple of times this past week, I think inspired by the idea of coalition building and connecting with people who have similar interests. So we used, I think, we used education as a lens in looking at, sorry. We were looking at education as a lens to carry forth, I think, some of the work of the Modjeska Simkins School. So in addition to what Julie mentioned, and then Cecil, I really inspired by his project as well. I'll just say I put forward 2 ideas, and one was looking at the idea of the Modjeska Simkins curriculum and how it's outlined really well online as a resource. There's a way to expand this, looking at younger children and using or working with Ms. Singletary's Freedom School at Francis Burns as a way to develop this curriculum for youth, because we begin to see discourse in anti-racist education going younger and younger, working with younger children around this idea. And I thought, forming a partnership with the Freedom School, we could complement some of the areas that aren't taught about South Carolina's history in school. So Dr. Bobby Donaldson comes in and talks about the Civil Rights Movement. I thought about especially the New Legacy Project, coming into Freedom School and looking at issues of labor history, unions perhaps, I mean, for a younger audience, but some of these ideas, right, that aren't necessarily taught in schools, and bringing that into the Freedom School as a form of partnership building. A second idea put out there too, which I think can be applied nationally, is the idea of training teachers to be political actors within the system, and really applying the Modjeska Simkins model to teachers specifically. So designing a class that looks at overlooked history, but connecting it to a project, much like Brett and Dr. Green and Daniel and Kyle are asking of us, but asking teachers to do that as well, because especially the past couple of weeks has become painfully obvious to me that I think a lot of teachers do not see their work as political, yet if they see it that way, they are part of the problem. So how do we use the Modjeska Simkins model and really targeting teachers? I know the SCEA does this, or it has a format to do this, but I thought partnering with the SCEA would be great to really try to recruit teachers. And of course, you know, having someone like Cecil and Julie, who are embedded in SCEA and Richland One respectively, is a way to recruit teachers to this program as well. So I just wanted to put that out there real quick to know that our education folks are, you know, doing outstanding work, and I think it's a good way to sort of complement the work of South Carolina Progressive Network.
Thank you, Dr. Hale, and I'm just so pleased that you're with us, and that Cecil and Julie are in tune with you, because in starting the Modjeska School, the reason we started with older members at a graduate level was to teach people to go teach in primary and secondary and high schools, because that's what we're going to do. These old folks, they ain't going to be around long, and we've got to get to the youngsters, and they're much more open-minded and aware of the need to be less bigoted than their parents are. So thank you very much. Let's work together on that.
These are some fantastic project ideas, and I think what we're going to have to do is certainly find ways to follow up with folks who presented their ideas tonight, because these are really good ideas that I don't, you know, want to go to waste or have them be forgotten about. Any other project ideas? Again, you know, we have plenty of time to brainstorm here. Any other ideas or maybe thoughts on the projects you've heard about so far?
Dr. Green, I uploaded to the chat box a Word document that I'll scan quickly, partly in response to something that Brett just said. Some of the old folks aren't going to be around for a whole lot longer, and partly in response to a recurring theme that I've heard over the last 9 class conversations, and that is that that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel has already been invented. It's just a matter of finding your place in the wheel and adding momentum. I took the concept of the TED Talks For those of you who are not familiar with the concept of TED Talk, if you don't know what TED Talks are, TED TED, TED, stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design, was founded, I think, out in Silicon Valley in the early 1980s as a sort of an organic think tank where entrepreneurs could pat one another on the back and talk about lofty ideas. But it has evolved into a structure in which TED Talks invite persons with knowledge and skill and expertise in their particular fields, that's technology, entertainment, and design, to deliver a 20-minute talk in day-long events that are held around the world. These talks are filmed, they're posted online for public viewing, and especially since the advent of online sharing, thousands of these talks have gone viral, and in some cases they've spawned entire careers for their participants or brought otherwise unknown experts to a public viewing audience. And then in many cases, some of these speakers return 2 or 3 or 4 years later to deliver additional talks on new topics related to their study or their work. More recently, I've noticed that public radio has added to its roster something called TED Radio Hour. The TED Radio Hour adds interviews where somebody, a host of the program, actually interviews one-on-one the TED speakers after. So you hear clips of the TED Talk itself, and then you have an interview with the speaker to dive more deeply. And these the TED Radio Hours broadcast weekly, and it's also available online. So I've taken these concepts and adapted them in something that I would propose to call lead talks, just as TED is an acronym for technology, entertainment, and design. I think LEAD serves our purposes as an acronym for labor, education, activism, and democracy. Similarly, they can feature persons with knowledge and skill and expertise in those 4 fields: labor, education, activism, and democracy, to deliver similar 20-minute talks in a context that is specific to South Carolina, specific to our present organizing challenges and opportunities. And then just as the TED Radio Hour follows up the TED Talk with a TED interview, we can follow up our lead talks with a lead interview. And then recordings of these talks and these interviews can be archived at a public website and uploaded to a YouTube channel for public viewing and access. The idea here is that those folks in their teens and 20s and 30s who are just being introduced to the idea of organizing and might have some energy and passion to spare, don't have to start from scratch, but can find somebody through lead talks and lead interviews who already has developed or has found their own niche in the progressive continuum, and connect with them. So to reinforce a focus on movement into public action, going from being a private person, a private entity, into being a public actor, I propose in this that the participants, folks that I asked to participate, or we asked to participate and deliver a lead talk, be asked to develop and deliver a 20-minute remark, an address that follows the story of self, us, and now model. It's a model that's used by community organizers that invites a speaker to describe their own path into activism, how they apply coalition building and the importance of collaboration for collective action, and then the challenges that they confront presently in their work. In reality, I suspect that every person who's in the Modjeska school could do this themselves, could devise a 20-minute talk in which you talk about how you came to your current role in leadership in your particular field, in whatever passion you're pursuing, the importance of coalition building that you have found, and how you've gone about applying coalition building principles to achieve your goals, and what challenges you presently confront. In fact, over the last 9 classes, I've heard several of you talk about the challenges in your particular fields of work. There's a separate model if the story of self, us, and now isn't, to use somebody else's idiom, sexy enough. there is a less appealing acronym. There's a model with a less appealing acronym, ISA-HUE, that I can describe later. So to pursue a project like this, I think what would be really helpful is if our members of the Progressive Network could help to brainstorm a list of people that you believe ought to be asked to participate in and devise a 20-minute talk on these topics in those 4 areas. In the areas of labor, I mean, it's easy to go to labor organization officers and labor organization field organizers. But there are also folks who are sort of below the surface, the ones whose names don't get put in lights all the time. And I suspect some of us in the rooms know folks who are just as inspiring, even though they don't have titles like president and chair and whatnot. And then, of course, the same is true in education. I know the folks that I know at the SCEA, but you may know people in your own schools or in your own school districts that I wouldn't know. And it would be helpful to help brainstorm a list of folks that you recommend to call up for this purpose. Same is true in activism. There are all sorts of advocacy organizations in the state, if not on the state level, then on a local level, working on municipal issues that I and others of us in the class might not know anything about. However, they are effective organizers and they have a point of view and some passion, and it would be beneficial to others to hear them talk about what they're doing. And then the 4th category, democracy, what I envision there are people who either currently are engaged in elective office or have served in elective office, and so can speak from the perspective of organizing for electoral politics and related fields. Not just people who have served in office, but maybe campaign managers, because those folks come from somewhere and they are motivated by something. So Brett and Dr. Green, those are my thoughts.
So I can see us rivaling Fox News soon. You work with Wes, and we've got our broadcast studio. We're gonna rock.
There you
go. Thanks so much for that, Cecil. Those are some great ideas that, like I said before, we definitely got to follow up on, because I think there's a lot here with this particular class in terms of talent and know-how and brain power that I definitely want to make sure we harness for the weeks, months, and even years to come. All right. Any other ideas or suggestions?
I can go.
Things that, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of the things that I've been interested in over the years is the history that has been left out of the respectful commentary of historians. And the first few weeks of this course stimulated an idea in me, especially looking at Becker's book, to do some publishing. Now, I understand that young folks are not reading books as much, but one of the things that I'm very interested in, and I've actually started on, is kind of an expose, if you will, of how historiography has chosen leaders for African Americans, using, for instance, the fact that everybody who knows anything about Black history knows Frederick Douglass, but very few people know Henry Highland Garnett, from whom Frederick Douglass got a lot of his ideas. And also Martin Delany, who is also not very well known. We also hear about Booker T. Washington, but we don't hear about the people who oppose him other than W.B. Du Bois. And we know about the ubiquitous civil rights movement, but very few people know anything at all about the Black Power movement and how it came to be, so that I'm currently actually engaged in doing, it started out as a paper, but it's getting longer and longer, in which I'm looking into those 3 areas and possibly even some more. To publish it or to just make it available, because I'm doing it with no profit motive in mind. So I think that we can do exposés and on how our thought processes have been influenced. That's my idea.
That sounds like a great project and one that I think is absolutely necessary. And I think with what I'm thinking about is that some of these projects could actually be linked together in various ways. So, for example, Dr. Gallman's project, we could take excerpts of that and put it on our Palmetto version of Democracy Now!, or we could use it in conjunction with the podcast, or with Cecil's project about the lead talks. You know, we could have Dr. Gallman give a talk or two about what he's discussed this evening. So again, there's a lot of synergy I'm seeing this evening in terms of various ideas and projects. And speaking of which, I know that Julie had a project idea too, and I'm curious as to what yours was.
Yeah, so I've spoken about this before, and this is the part that kind of speaks to me, is in terms of housing and my role in it, and how we as a local community can do a lot better. So I would like to dig in on the fair housing aspect, and see what can be done. Certainly within our organization that I manage, we can create a better, I think, conversation about fair housing beyond this kind of, can I say this or can I say that? Can I do this or what can I not say? What's going to keep me out of trouble? And I think that that's generally how it's displayed in our industry, in apartment communities, is just let's cover ourselves and make sure from a liability standpoint we're not going to get ourselves in trouble. And I think that there's the context of why the Fair Housing Act had to come to be and everything related to that is really important for people to know. And I don't think a lot of people have ever gotten that far into it. So I think that there's a model for doing a better job in our local organizations here with the apartment association or within our own management companies, as to providing context or a model for that context so that people can have a better, more meaningful conversation around it. And then ultimately that will affect them in a way that would be a more meaningful application of it, I believe. So I think that that's probably where I will want to start. And being that we are a member of several organizations here related to housing locally, again, this is kind of where I can start, is to be a better resource for folks with fair housing, and making sure it's beyond this, hey, let me just make sure I've done my continuing education and I know what fair housing is. Because and beyond just the discriminatory part of it, but how it relates to affordable housing and accessibility for people with disabilities and financial solutions for people. I think that's largely glossed over. I don't think anybody really relates to that in any of the educational things that I've been a part of. So I think there's a better way to do that, and to start here within my own organization and then locally, and see what kind of traction we can build from there.
Thank you, Julie. You exemplify us finding something that resonates with what you're doing. I mean, there's nothing better in life than when your avocation conjoins with your vocation. And finding something that you can do that makes your vocation better is perfect. And so we have a seat at the table of the governmental entities involved in the Midlands and fair housing that allows us to be more striking than people that work for the government or people coming in from the private industry. We can really be obnoxious. And so congratulations, Julie.
I think there's another part to, Dr. Green was talking about synergy with things. I think that there's, particularly with the apartment association here in Columbia, I don't know how many units are represented. It's a lot though. And in any given tract of apartment community, it's 250, potentially 300 units in one community. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people that live there, and a lot of people that we could get in front of from a voter registration or engagement, or, hey, you're new here, how can you've relocated? These are who your representatives are, in a format that could be integrated with what they're already giving out in a welcome packet or that sort of thing. I think that there's something, and that's just a citizenship, like make sure you're an active citizen of your new home campaign.
Yeah, this precisely what we've had fits and starts at over the years, and the clear example of the need for it was when the people died at the Allen Benedict Court, and that the people that rushed in were the lawyers that were trying to sue people. There was no tenants union, there was no organizing going on, and so we have members that are residents there that we will introduce you to, and you can run with it.
Okay.
Let's be in touch. And I did mention Dr. Gallman. I have a question before we move on.
Okay.
Put that wonderful thing that you just spoke to that you're going to put on the table, name it for me so I can make my notes clearer.
I'm calling it historiographical misorientation.
Wow.
Well, okay. I'm sorry I asked. We'll work on that. Marjorie, did I hear you saying something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, just a small ad in terms of what another organization, Black Social Workers, are doing in order to take care of ourselves, really. I'm going to suggest a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, written by one of my social work colleagues, which really explores what folks are going through and what they've been going through. But in this instance, what the helpers need to do to protect themselves. So it's called, as I said, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And the author is Joy DeGruy, capital D-E-G-R-U-Y. I'll post it. And so again, we're going to read the book together as a group and discuss it in terms of how we help ourselves in order for us to help the folks that we're supposed to be serving. Okay, so that will kind of be an adjunct to what the network is doing.
If I could add to that, Marjorie, the Black Association of Black Social Workers in Columbia are part of a larger group called the Catalyst and Bongi, which is made up of about 11 or 12 different organizations that get together to do projects in Columbia. And
thank you. I'm glad you added that.
yeah, and I guess I could be a liaison to that group. So we can, so it doesn't make any sense to recreate the wheel, as I heard someone mention it. So communication is the key.
Thank you, Dr. Gallman. I wrote down lies our patriarchs told us as shorthand for your thing there.
Question.
The idea that we don't need to recreate the wheel is one of the 101 things of organizers is when you go to go do something and you're going to dig a hole, look and see if somebody's already started so you can start already deep.
I have a question for you, Brett. Sorry to interrupt. Do we have any sort of I know there's going to be a recording of this, but is there a list of, or do you want to generate from this discussion a list of what people are working on, their skill sets? A lot of people have mentioned things I had no idea that, they were maybe technically oriented or, website design or something like that.
I'm recording and I've been writing rapidly, and I'm sure that our crack officers here are going to fill in the blanks. We'll sum it up and send it out.
Thank you.
Chairman Kyle, if you'll remember to make me do that.
Hi, Brett. If I may speak, I'd like to talk a little bit about certainly I heard I don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's so many great existing projects that have been spoken about tonight. But as chair of those in the Theta sorority in Columbia chapter,
Eva, you're not coming through clearly. Dr. Green, do you hear Eva clearly?
Not really, no.
Eva, try and speak up or move your phone or something.
Okay, so my connection keeps coming in and out, so I'll make it really quick. As chair of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated Columbia chapter, there's a lot of existing projects that aligns with our initiatives. And so we would like to be the resource and support in providing support and partnership with the combating voter suppression, racial profiling, missing voter projects. Daniel spoke about Fair Map, and then the Election Protection Project. Several of those projects, we could be the resource providing support. So I will follow up with you, Brett, and whoever, Daniel, and some others, to perhaps collaborate and have come out and speak with virtually, of course, speak with our chapter social action committee about.
Well, Eva, that's a great idea, except the reason you've been in the Modjeska school is so we don't have to come out there. Delta Sigma Theta has been one of our members since the beginning, and you got it. I mean, we'll work with you, give you all the tools you need, but you're the teacher now. Congratulations. And Annie McDaniel will be glad to help her. She was with us earlier. I think she had to bail out, but you've got some great people there, and we really do want to help you do all that you just suggested to carry it to your community and beyond.
Thank you. I hope you got that, because my connection is bad. It just keeps coming in and out. So I want to try to speak real quick and get it in and get it out for my connections mess up again.
I got it. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Got a few minutes left in tonight's class. Any other project ideas we want to throw out there before we adjourn for the evening?
No.
Chris, did you want to? I think you're muted right now.
Sorry, yeah. This isn't a new project, but it's been mentioned a couple of times, and the theme of people aging out was also brought up. So there's another project called the New Legacy Project that is part of the network, and that's the youth coordinating body of the network. However, the participants within that are continuing to age themselves. And so the goal of the project is to try and recruit younger activists and get them more civically engaged. There's been times where we've worked with different schools and different social groups with the youth, but it had just been mentioned a couple of times in passing, and so I just wanted to clarify a little bit about that project.
Bristol, you mentioned SAFE.
Oh yeah, so one of the events that the group have done was SAFE. It happened 2 different years, and SAFE was stood for Subversive Arts Festival Extravaganza, where we combined different visual artists, poetry, music, and that all had a social awareness or activist tinge to them. Another project within that group was the State of the Youth Project, which was a research-backed project where we were looking at the data for voting statistics, healthcare, employment, education, criminal justice, all focused on South Carolina's youth, and trying to centralize that data and have it for reference. But yeah, so that's another existing project of the network.
Yeah, we can fold the New Legacy Project's outreach in with the curriculum work that the education group is doing with Dr. Hale.
I'd like to just add, I work in community arts development, So I'm really interested in the overlap of arts and activism. So that is something I could possibly contribute. And then also oral history projects.
Sum that up again. Community arts.
Community arts development.
Okay. Yeah, we talk about, us old people like me talk about culture as an organizing tool, but everybody, all my cultural heroes are dead, so we need your help.
I work at the South Carolina Arts Commission, so specifically in rural communities, but I don't really have a great project, but I can contribute in that way.
I'm sure we'll find one. Thank you.
Hello. Can I share my project?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So sorry, Mr. Robert. Can I share something on the screen? So. Yes. Can you give me line?
Does he have permission to, can somebody give him permission to share his screen?
Oh, you want to share your screen and put something on chat, Bianca?
Yeah.
No, he wants to share the screen.
Oh, I can do that. Hold on. Okay, Bianca, you're a co-host. You can share your screen now.
Okay. So I've just my ideas of my project. I got my ideas from the Jim Crow, the Constitution of 1895, because the Constitution says that the current system of South Carolina State, it is started from the Constitution of 1895. So my project is about creating awareness about candidates to give electorates information about candidates. So what I want to do with my project is that to collect some ideas or candidate profile, especially people who are working in a member of parliament in general assemblies, so that people can know what these people they are working for. So the first of the things I want to share about these people is that I have to record to get their vote in general assemblies. So what, in terms of piece of legislation, what are these people voting for? So because there are some legislation in general assemblies whereby they were created for inequalities. So there are members of parliament who are trying to keep those legislation there, but unfortunately people outside, they don't know about those people. They don't know about who are working for people who are trying to maintain the status quo of those legislations. Then for me is that to get the record of vote of member in general assemblies, who vote for this, who not vote for this, and then trying to share those informations with, for example, students or women to know about their candidate, so that when the time to come to go to vote, they know who are the candidate they can vote for, who are not the candidate they cannot vote for. Because it's like most of this information are not known by people. So that is a project I want to create, or to come with website where you can give information, biography of these candidates, their vote in the general assemblies, so that people can know all those informations. When it comes to election, they already know this guy or this member of parliament did not support these legislations, so we cannot vote for him. So that's the kind of project I want to come to create awareness about what these people they are doing in general assemblies, because it's like what they are doing there is kept So people are not knowing what they are doing. So for us, it's just to come up with information and share that information of different electorate. So this is my draft project charter, which I tried to create, which I've started already creating some of the project. I don't know if you are seeing, but to make it, let me see, to make it, maybe I can change another document where you can see the scope of statement, yeah, scope statement. Then we can get clear what I want to do with this project when it comes to this candidate. So it's just to create awareness, to identify candidate, their bibliography, to get their vote, and this information. And when they get all this vote, I go and share with these people to know that what candidate they are. And this has to do to take all 124 member of House representative. I have to take the record of 46 senators. I have to go down also. I have to take a member from Richland County Council and Columbia City Council. I want to, because my project is just small, I want to start it by Richland County before I can expand it to different parts of the state. So I want to work with these 3 institutions, Columbia City Council, and then Richland County Council, and General Assembly. So that is how I want to go with my project, and try. So I need to have a lot of outreach and to identify different schools where I can go and get students and get some stakeholders to get their requirement of how I can work with them. So that is my project I want to work on.
Well, Bikyanga, I'm quite impressed, and you have taken a large task on here, and I hope that you don't have any more school or work to do, because Richland County is an example of what's not working. And one of the things that you know, and that most people don't, is that in South Carolina, there's no governmental responsibility whatsoever in telling people what the candidates are running for. Some states actually gather information and distribute the candidates' positions. Here, it's up to the private media to do that, and they don't. And so taking just Richland County is a great model, and I'll be glad to work with you. And know other people that are as frustrated as we are with the lack of competent guidance. And so this is a great project, Bikyanga. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, that is an absolutely fantastic project idea, and I think this is one of those projects that could use some volunteers to help out with and simple information and such. This is, again, a great idea, and in fact, all the projects we've heard about this evening, I think, are great projects that will really help move not only our organization forward, but help move South Carolina forward as a whole. Any closing ideas about potential projects?
Well, I'm humbled. I'm just amazed that the level of the quality of our students keeps getting better, and I hope that the quality of our educational level is keeping up with you guys. You're our leaders. We learn from you. Thank you. Take us home, Robert.
All right. So with that being said, of course, this is the final actual class of the Modjeska School for Human Rights. I just want to say it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be your lead instructor this semester. But don't forget, this Friday at 4 p.m., we have the graduation on the 3rd of July, the day before Independence Day in the United States. Brett, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I'm remembering that not all of you are even in our database. So there's no way we can get in touch with you unless you go. If you don't even have $10, you can go in and sign up for the e-list, and you get in the same database you do if you become a member. But I don't know why you've stuck with us this long if you don't want to be a member of this wonderful organization. And what you will find if you get on the database is we're going to do something we've been talking about doing since we started the school. You just finished what's a graduate level for organizer training, so you can go forth and train people. that was the concept to get the thing going. And it has all along needed all these different things that we're talking about now, but also different short courses, skill sessions, legislative, understanding the legislature, understanding local government, and things that we'll be doing on and on now that we have this Zoom ability where you all don't have to drive across the state or even leave your home. So stay tuned, but you've got to sign up on our website, fcpronet.com, to be a member, or at least on our e-list to be able to keep posted. We'll keep sending stuff out to our graduates, but we need you in our database. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Robert, so much. Everybody, give Robert Green a hand. This thing just would be really, really slack with this old white guy here.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Green.
Ashe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Green. And Brett, and everyone. Kyle and Daniel.
Again, the school would be nothing without all of you participating and really being a part of what has grown into, I think, one of the best parts of the Progressive Network. And again, we're going to be going on to bigger and brighter things. But again, don't forget this Friday, 4 to 6 p.m., we'll be having our graduation ceremony. And I want to ask everybody to do one favor for me for Friday. If you have anything in terms of things you liked about the class and things you think could be improved for a class, bring those as well Friday. And we can talk about those briefly during the graduation ceremony.
See you all Friday.
I would recommend you get a better political scientist than me next class.
We're just breaking you in good, Dr. Shaw. And John Hale, thank you for being there and being with us, and we're going to work you harder next session.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Good night and Godspeed, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Good night,
everybody.
You guys are great.
Woohoo!
Woohoo to you too.